I think they knew that I had given my blood and my every milliliter of my sweat trying to make it work. But I guess I just wasn't clever enough to come up with something that would really blow everybody away and be something completely different.
It was just set up wrong to begin with.
It was a very sort of bad period for us, all this film, because we were fighting the losing battle all the time.
People get more conservative, the costs get greater, the studio gets scared that they're not going to make as much money, and you better do every little beat that was in the first two because they know they work. But of course, the audience is ahead of you if you do that.
Well, Alien 3, everybody wanted to make the sequel to Alien, kind of except us. We weren't so, I mean, we were happy to do it, but we weren't all that enthused. Because we thought, you know, what do you do with this one to make it different? You know, the whole idea you can't do something that's just going to be a reheat of 1 or 2.
We knew we wanted to carry the company's duplicity and need for this weapon further. And we wanted to find an environment that was rich and ominous. At first we thought about a scientific way station in space where sort of covert experimentation was going to go on. And subsequently we thought about making it Alcatraz in space.
We went through a series of writers and a series, you know, some directors, and, you know, we talked to Ridley about doing it. We talked, you know, to, I think, who was Rennie Harlan, somebody we actually hired at one point.
When I signed on to do Alien 3, my first principle was that I'm not going to copy Ridley Scott or Jim Cameron. They are fantastic filmmakers, and I felt that if I could bring something new into the series, then it was really worth doing. And it wasn't just a movie that is just a sequel, but it was really a movie on its own, taking all the great heritage from its predecessors. My original approach was that we would go to where the aliens actually come from. We would place the story on the planet where they really originate from and really explain what they are. And maybe they are not born to be bad at all.
We talked about the Planet of the Aliens because it just cost too much money in those days. Now you could do. I'd like to see Ridley do that. That would be good.
Other concepts that were floating around in those days were also the idea of the aliens coming to Earth.
On Earth, everyone can hear you scream.
I think the first version that we had was a version that was based on work that Walter Hill and David Giler had done with William Gibson. The next writer after that who was involved was Eric Red, who did The Hitcher, and there was also this concept of a prison ship where the aliens end up. Eric worked on a version of this prison ship, and I wasn't that crazy about that concept because I just wanted to get out there to the planet, and I was afraid that there was just no way around the fact that we are going to end up in a similar kind of an environment with lots of corridors and lots of bulkheads and doorways and the kind of things that we've seen before. And then also David Toohey was involved.
His has prisoners on it. His is a prisoner's being shipped off into space to a planet. You follow the guy who is the prisoner being shipped off.
There was also talk about not necessarily having Sigourney Weaver involved in Alien 3.
Yes, I mean there was a question of whether she wanted to do a third one. There was always that lingering question from those, since no women turned out for Alien 2 either, so there was a question of couldn't we try to develop a male action hero for the franchise? So we were going to try to do that. None of this came to pass, of course.
First of all, I found out I wasn't going to be in the movie. Okay, I mean, I heard it through my agent or whatever that you're not in it, which was very painful. It hurt me a lot because I didn't really even get paid very well for Alien, and I thought, okay, well, if there's anybody who's going to be, usually with any sequel like that, they keep the characters. It's just a done deal.
James Cameron used to always talk about the possibilities of Alien 3 and what would happen, and everyone who was dying off used to always have their little jokes as to whether they were coming back or they might be an alien when they came back and things like that. And James Cameron always used to tell us that he always kind of planned on Ripley, Hicks, and Newt going back to Earth and being a family. And throughout the movie, there's different parts where there's a shot of the three of us. And like in MedLab, when the aliens had attacked Sigourney, there's a shot of me giving Sigourney a hug and Hicks right behind her. And that was like, I think, his big family shot.
Maybe I saw it more as becoming like a team, like Ripley and Hicks from then on in, and, whether it was Sigourney or whoever, probably rightfully so, did not see it that way.
How we began the story was one of the most interesting things. Do we keep the sort of family motif going, or do we? To me, Ripley's always been a sort of solitary person, even though she wants the other thing.
Are we gonna sleep all the way home?
All the way home.
Can I dream?
Yes, honey. I think we both can.
I believe that when you are doing a sequel and you're part of the series, that you do want to give the audience, in a certain way, you want to give them the same kind of an experience. They expect to see aliens, and they expect to see the heroine and certain type of situations. So I do believe that you want to give that satisfaction. But at the same time, I do believe that your job is to invent something new and offer the audience something new, because otherwise you're just rehashing what people before you did. So that was always my goal, and ultimately the reason why I had to make the hard decision and go to Walter Hill and say, Walter, I'm really sorry. I think I've been working on this for a year, and we've done illustrations and we've worked on all these storylines, but I really feel like somehow we keep circling the same premise, and for me it's not different enough from what the audience has seen before, and I just can't get excited about the idea of just having more guns and more aliens.
There were lots of versions, none of which were particularly successful, we thought. And then we hired Vincent Ward. We saw The Navigator. And when he came in and talked about it, it was definitely different. This was going to be a whole new, notion of Alien.
I got the call to come to LA, got the offer to direct Alien 3. I told them I wasn't interested in sequels. By the third phone call, I thought, well, I might as well give it a shot. I looked at the script they'd sent me. I didn't like it. I thought it was just the standard sci-fi stuff that you expect, all the gadgetry and so on. But I had a tiny idea, and on the plane over, in my imagination, I expanded it into a story. So by the time I got to LA, I sat in with the head of the studio, I sat in with my studio executive, and with the producers, and I pitched this story to them. And really, to my surprise, because I just wanted to get out of Australia for a break, they really liked it.
And then we were really gearing up to make the movie. They were really talking about making this movie, and Sigourney met with them, and she was happy with them. Everybody was pleased, and this was all going forward.
Very shortly after writing the story for Alien 3, I'd hopped off the plane, I'd written up the story. Within a month, the owner of the studio had given us a release date. Now that's great for somebody who wants to keep working, but it's not great if you're being adventurous about a story and exploring it.
I always felt that Alien 3 was a movie that initially, as a studio, we set out to make a release date and not make a movie. And I think along the way that changed, but that really set us back.
In the meantime, they were over in London and they were drawing up sets, and they were, we'd hired an art director and we were, moving along.
My production designer who I'd hired was working away building sets in London. We had the Bond stage, which was the largest stage in London at that time.
The prime reason why I wanted to do this picture was at that time it was going to be Monks in Space, a Gothic movie, and I would really like very much to do that because the opportunities of doing that sort of thing are few and far between.
I was involved right at the beginning with Vincent Ward, and his concept and visualization of the film was of a wooden planet floating in space, which was peopled by monks.
I had the world very strongly in my imagination, a wooden-clad environment with floors and floors, sometimes hundreds of meters high each floor, with each of their different parts of their monastic guilds in each of the floors.
We were all wondering how the hell we were going to do it and make it look as fantastic and as great as the previous two.
I mean, everyone has a series of visual images. It's like reading a book, isn't it? Certain things pop into your head, certainly. And that's depending upon the director's views. We combine, it's sometimes directors have a clear vision exactly what they want to do. Others don't have very much idea at all. So it's a matter really of, cutting the cloth to suit whoever the individual happens to be, really.
And then things happened that brought around changes.
Even though I'd had a commitment from everybody that they loved this idea, the idea that I'd had, by the time I was heading over to England and getting close to hiring crew and so on, they said, well, we like 2 out of 3 of your ideas. And I went, yeah, well, we like the bit where the alien, where you're going to scare the bejesus out of people and you're going to have an alien in Sigourney. The bit about the world, well, one producer said, well, couldn't they just be convicts? And I went, And then another producer said, who didn't necessarily agree with the first producer, but they kind of there seemed to be a trade-off going, said, well, why do we need this wooden environment anyway? Why don't we just have it a mining colony? So I went, guys, but we signed off on this. This is what you agreed to. And then, for a while, they backed off on that. And then I got this kind of list of saying, we want the following changes. Meet tomorrow with one of the key senior executives at Fox. I was made to wait outside a door for an hour, like a school kid, and I was in a terrible mood, I have to say, by the time I'd waited for an hour. And I'd seen this list, which was very aggressive. It was, you do, you obey. So I tried to talk my way around it and was completely unsuccessful. It was told, do it or be fired. First I said, you know what, I'd rather be fired.
We started out with a director who is a tremendous visualist in his own right. I think one of the great things that both Ridley Scott and James Cameron did on the first 2 Aliens is create dynamic visual worlds, but in an action-packed commercial environment. And I think the first director sort of was going away from that.
By this stage, because the original Alien and Aliens had become very successful, it had a different meaning than the first Alien had, which was relatively low budget, relatively unknown star, not too much was at risk. Now everything was at risk. This was the franchise, and this was what was going to keep the studio going, this one film. So they look at me and they go, well, this guy from New Zealand, he's got this kind of wild idea, he's made these independent films. I don't know, do we trust him or not? So there became a lot of cooks involved, in the making of this broth. So the whole thing became shaky with my star, and I love working with actors, with my producers wanting something a lot safer, with a release date looming. It was like being on a platform and watching all the things crumble below you, and frankly trying to do this dance to kind of keep everything together.
The reasons he departed were many and varied.
My line producer, who was fantastic, and he warned me one day. He said, your assistant you know, the assistant that the studio organised for you? And I went, yes, tall, beautiful, yes, love her, fantastic. He goes, she's phoning in every night to the studio. And you know, your production designer gets phone calls every night from the studio behind your back. He said, you're aware of this, aren't you? I went, yeah, sure. So I'd said to my studio exec, look, you know, I need another assistant, I need something, she's overqualified. And it's amazing. In the end, it only takes one personal relationship. If there's mixed agendas in that kind of highly politically charged situation, that can undermine everything.
So then Fincher was suggested by the studio.
I never met the director that took over for me. I think David's very talented. I thought he had an impossible task ahead of him to take over a story that had been kind of gutted and try and then turn it into something else with people writing pages for you as you're on the set.
I didn't envy David because it's sometimes when you go through a long development process and there are lots of people involved, it can really get you in a situation where it's very hard to still find your vision and be able to do what you really set out to do in the first place.
All movies start with one thing, which is a script. And David never had that.
I think David felt like once we got into the shooting, then his destiny would be in his own hands. And until we were shooting, he was subject to too many influences.
I think that when you go through any production, it's difficult, it's hard. I think when you go through your first one without a script, it's even harder.
We got flown to London to start putting a crew together, and of course I think they were happy that we had been involved in the last one and that there would be a continuity.
Vincent Ward had been over there and had been working with Norman Reynolds, who did the sets for Alien 3, had built the sets for the Vincent Ward script. Then they brought Fincher on as a new director.
David Fincher was suggested by head of the studio, actually, Roger Birnbaum. And we looked at his reels and we met him.
We had lunch with him at the Fox commissary, David, Walter, and I, and we had not met him before. And he was incredibly impressive. One of the most extraordinary meetings I think I've ever had. And it just gave us the confidence.
David comes from music videos as well as some magnificent commercials. He has an effects background. He used to work at ILM.
He was an effects cameraman who went into the music video industry, did a number of really pretty high-profile music videos, and Alien, I guess, was his first feature.
We wanted to, once again, to go with a director that did not have an established track record per se, but we thought was going to be a major director in the years to come.
I thought Fincher was a great idea, and so I liked him right away. Then we were in this big meeting at Fox, and with all the suits and everything, and I think he was wearing an animal rights T-shirt. I finally said toward the end of the meeting, "So how do you picture Ripley in this movie?" And he said, "I don't know, bald?" And that was the moment where I fell in love with him, because I thought, that's such a great idea. You have to do it, you have to make it make sense, but I just thought, absolutely.
So Fincher committed, and we were back in London, and now we're going to rewrite the script.
And David Fincher was like a breath of fresh air, really. And in fact, I was the first person to greet him in the art department. I thought, in fact, he was the director's assistant. He was so young.
He came in not having that preparation time, not having all the meetings, and not necessarily having a full script to work with, because of the conceptual differences that the first director that they had employed had brought onto the production. He then wanted to put his ideas into Alien 3.
He took Vincent's original idea, but he changed it to a mechanized planet. He changed it to a convict planet.
David wanted a more mechanical concept of this planet that was perhaps at one time had been a very thriving factory kind of a planet, and I don't know whether it had always been a prison planet or it turned into that. But in the meantime, everything was in waste and rusted and broken down, and quite once again, a dark look to everything.
He did say at one point what he was looking for was something where you could throw in a bucket of water and just hose the place down, the entire planet. So that's his sort of brief to me, and that's from that all sorts of things have sprung, really.
If it was Fincher's idea to shave all their heads, put barcodes on there, he had a whole other quite different take, but would allow us to, was within the realm of, it was a spin-off of Vincent's original idea.
They had started out with Vincent with this script, and because of the old creative difference, problem, and then he was gone. So they had all this money that they had already spent on, making pay-or-play deals with actors and so on, plus building all these sets. And Norman builds the world, and I mean, he was like going berserk building sets over there because that's what he loves to do, and he's great at it. So I mean, they had a lot of money invested in this movie, but all of a sudden they didn't have a script.
The script that we originally spoke about has changed very much so. So what I did was actually to design the set in such a way that it basically embodied some of the things that David wanted to do, and sort of set them up where I thought best. And I think David actually went back to the set, and with the writer, they sort of evolved things that he wanted to do, but was more precise about where they were actually going to be done. It's almost the cart before the horse in some ways,
So that rewrite came in, and it was a disaster, and everybody walked off the movie. So nobody was going to do that one.
There was a 3-month period where we were in effect shut down. We kept working in the creature stuff, but we were kind of working away on dead bodies and things, not the actual creature.
We spent most of the summer working on the dead bodies of Hicks and Newt and Bishop that they find in the wreckage, as well as starting design work on the alien, because at that point everything else in the script was subject to being thrown out. We didn't know where all that stuff was going to go. So we had a crew of Americans. We had a lot of our English crew was assembled, and we were just going into great detail on these bodies, trying to continue to have work to keep people busy with for a number of months before the script was finally revised to the point and we could start trying to catch up for the rest of production, because the shoot was going to be happening in, I think it started in November.
Yeah, you'll be real glad to know that everybody's back in this movie. Hicks?
Rafaela De Laurentiis, who I was doing this movie for, a little movie that I won't mention the name of, she had been over to the Pinewood Studios, and she said she saw my character, Hicks, made up of like a dummy character of me, laying on the ground with my chest opened up, as if the alien came out of me. So, oh, that's interesting. So I called my agent, who's Ed L'Amato, who's like way up there, and I said, Ed, what the fuck, man? I mean, it's one thing not to be in it. It's another thing for me to have had fucking that alien come back in me and have it come out of my chest with, blah, blah, blah. I said, no fucking way. Can they do this, can they? And he said, no, man, that's your likeness, and they can't, so on and so forth. So he called them up, and he said, I don't know how far they got, but they were told that they couldn't do that, and we would sue them. And so first they started saying, well, can we pay Michael for this? Can we pay? We'll pay him a certain amount of money. I said, I don't care how much money you have. I was really stupid back then. I don't care how much money you have, that alien is not coming out of my chest, okay? And so that was that. So then we got a call, a month or two later that they wanted to use my photograph. I said, now you can pay me. So they did. So I got paid almost as much for that photograph as I did for the first movie that I did. So in certain respect, it helped a little bit, but it was that was all done through like gritted teeth and them saying, well, yeah, okay, we'll pay you, and I'll say, well, you'll pay me more, and back and forth, and so on and so forth, and it wasn't very harmonious, and I'm sure it'll never work. If I would have known David Fincher was going to be David Fincher, I probably would have said, well, you do whatever you want, David, just use me in one of your future movies.
Eventually, Sigourney agreed that if Walter and I would write it, she would do it on faith. And Fincher did too.
It's a hard character to write, Ripley. They're really the only ones, except for maybe Jim, who understand her, because she's always written like a very tough, obnoxious woman by other writers, Shit, crap, it's all this really. But they know that she's just sort of somewhat aloof.
So Walter and I started writing while they were building, and kind of took this concept of Vincent's and turned it around a bit.
They hired him, and it was a great idea, and then almost as soon as he started, they started kind of...
I get this call, first from Tom Jacobson, who's in London, and he goes, and I had called him about some, script I wanted to look at, and he was calling me back. I said, Tom, thanks for calling me back. He said, no, I'm not calling you back. I'm calling you. Sit down. So he said, I'm in London. We have this chaos on Alien 3. We're going to replace the line producer, and we want you to come here. So I get there, and I'm trying to read this stuff on the plane and look at these storyboards and try to understand the genesis of the script. And I get there, and there's enormous construction going on a scale that I had never actually done, to be honest. And I'm looking at every stage of Pinewood as us in these giant sets with metal and cranes and just phenomenal and brilliant. I mean, I'm going, wow. And everybody knows I'm coming, and I'm like, I have an assistant, and I have this, and I have that, and everyone's waiting for me, and I see Sigourney, and she looks at me and she goes, welcome to the rat's nest. And I said, oh, that's gonna be fun. Bringing this all together, kind of scripted, evolving with 3 weeks to go, huge investment in construction based on pages that might change, storyboards that were clearly hundreds of days of shooting if you looked at them. And once I looked at these storyboards, I just said, this is impossible. It's endless. And we'll just, I'll have an English accent when I leave here.
Alien 3 was a tough shoot. It was a long shoot, and again, we're working at Pinewood Studios in London, and it's, working through those winter months in freezing cold sound stages, and, everybody gets miserable, everybody gets sick, and that really takes a toll on you.
So no kidding, it's really cold here. I think they said this is the coldest weather they've had in 4 years.
In these pictures, they've always had, long working hours and often 6-day weeks and just killer schedule and no mercy from the studio.
We went through this production continually reworking the script to make up for a short pre-production, a rush into... The movie got greenlit based on a whole different version of the script. And David was forced to deal with that in a very short period of time, where he had to design the alien, he had to design the sets, and he had to write the script all the way into the depths of production.
We were not working with a full completed script to its conclusion, so that is problematical because you're dealing with a catch-up process all the time, you know, trying to sort of move forward but also trying to finish off. I mean, because the days we work are very long, so if you're trying to finish a script, and certainly as a director, if you, I mean, not that he was the writer, but if you're trying to work with the writers to conclude something, you know, you're going to have huge problems trying to do that whilst working at very long days that we work as well.
I remember I was sent to the dressing room for a lie down, and he came in an hour later, and he said, listen, drop the accent. So there's a scene, I've watched the picture where in one scene I'm sounding like God knows who, Charles Manson, or Charles Manson's British cousin.
He's on mines. Nobody can stop it.
What about Boggs and
But
Rains?
they got slaughtered like pigs. It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
And then I'm sounding like some fella from Liverpool. All of a sudden, in a straitjacket.
You married?
Me?
You should get married, have kids. Pretty girl. I used to know lots of them back home.
Happy days.
Okay, and Paul, let's start with your chin down a little bit more, like he's a little lower than that. There we go. And roll sound. You want to take 5. And action. Cut. One more. It's a little bit too fast.
I do remember that, you know, that we were always adapting to new material. Without, you know, but that, you know, that we're not the only movie that has done that. But it was the stakes were just too high to do that because our unit was so big, and you know, we just had so many people on the payroll. We had so many, you know, and we were it wasn't flexible because we had sort of shot our wide with set construction. But almost when I got there, you know, there was almost like no money left in set construction.
The sets are fantastic. I mean, unbelievable sets. And some of the sets we worked on, huge, like 40, 50 foot high constructions. And the thing will look extraordinary. I know that.
You go onto the set and it's smoky and you see one of the actors in costume and makeup sort of standing by a wall. You're in the movie. You know, never mind the music and all the, you know, the actual whatever it looks like on the screen, which is always different anyway, and the cutting and the editing. And it's already all there for you.
We're treading a difficult area here, an area that combines both some science fiction and the past. There are hints of, in certain things, you can see some Art Nouveau influences and other things. We're really taking an old world and saying this is in the future sometime. It's rather like seeing medieval architecture today.
I actually have felt a great camaraderie with these particular actors because a lot of them, we have some mutual friends, and they're sort of, we have similar trainings and stage experience, so I've actually felt more comfortable with this cast than with any of them.
I spent the third film watching Sigourney work a lot, you know, just watching her. Even on my days off, I would come and just watch the way she worked, because needless to say, she was the veteran of the cast.
Your first line is what? What is it?
Oh, you're telling me to come and get.
Yeah, so just give me a little bit of a moment, and then so I can just sit on this guy holding this toothbrush going, so if you tell me they're coming to take it away, but it's fine, that's what we want. If they don't feel like we want, you know, let's get rid of it.
We could have done many great Shakespeare plays with this group. You know, you could have done any of them. And they all were very, I thought they were very loyal to Dave.
He is extraordinary, you know, utter total confidence, which he inspires from the people that he works with.
I would never have thought it was his first film. And where he's placing the camera, I've never seen it done that way.
His ideas seemed very cinematic. Even then he'd joke, he said, yeah, this is a sort of Hitchcockian bit, you know, and here comes John Ford. And so there are all these little nods, you know, and it was a lovely energy, you know, it was the kind of, the energy of somebody confident and someone who was a fan.
A sliver at the bottom of the 65mm frame is the ground, and then it's mostly sky. So we would do the split so that along, like the first, if you imagine that pretty much just to the left of where the turquoise, the tent is. Right. Just to the left is where the left side of frame is.
I was a different person on Alien 3. I mean, I've never been as tough in some way. I mean, I don't know what people remember me, but I knew I had to kind of like step up to the plate or just get buried. And I don't know if I got buried or not. I don't know what really happened, to be honest.
Not very good weather for this. Dusk. Yeah, but dusk in a blue sky means no shoot.
It's supposed to rain this afternoon.
Okay, dusk in a blue sky means no shooting. Yeah. Okay?
Are we painting the sky?
No. Dusk in a blue sky. You can't paint the sky right along there. Okay, Ezra?
Gotcha.
We're cool on the concept now. We're all hip to this. You
tape.
saw it right here.
Dusk in a blue sky.
Ezra just
we'll
said,
shoot it anyway.
If it's a blue sky, we don't have to shoot. Right, Ezra? Hi, Joe.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that one. Let's see that.
Yeah, better?
That's it.
Guess the drill. That's the one you want.
Yeah.
You know, those mechanical effects guys from London were unbelievable. You know, what they did, and you know, and the marshalling for each shot of wind machines and doors opening and closing and smoke coming in, and you know, that I learned a lot on that movie.
The thing with that movie is there were no weapons as such, so trying to create this mayhem with just fire was pretty tricky, but I think we did it convincingly.
Priority to special effects, especially mechanical special effects, is always safety. You know, we always have to think we're going to do the job without hurting anybody, and that's always the most important thought in our mind.
It was getting through the fire sequences as well as we could, safely. We had a couple of instances where things were quite tricky.
Yeah, there were a couple of injuries. No one, you know, was killed. I mean, no one suffered any life-threatening. But you know, there was a fire thing that happened. You know, there was a kind of blowback through one of those tubes, and a couple of the special effects and fire marshal guys got burned. You know, they recovered, but yeah, there were a couple of things. It was a very challenging movie. It was a dangerous movie. We were lucky more didn't happen.
She'll come through, it'll be dark, and then she'll come into this section of the lights.
Jordan Cronenworth, who I was a terrific admirer, he actually did Blade Runner, you know, with Ridley. Started the picture, and he got ill, you know. Like in the first week, it wasn't going well.
That's kind of just a sad story, to be honest. I mean, my view, first of all, I mean, he's the only person I've ever seen David have reverential respect for is Jordan.
I like that a lot. Yeah, can I get something through that window in there?
Okay. But wait till you see it sprayed down so it's balanced.
Okay.
My father had Parkinson's disease. He had it for 25 years, and I got there, and I understood it. You know, it's this very specific condition. It's not a general condition. And it has a trait that is really, really difficult, which is that you have huge swings of functionality, you know, and you can be almost fully functional, and then you can be like paralyzed, stiff as a board, unable to move. So I get there and I go, you know, Jordan's got Parkinson's disease. I mean, I didn't know it, you know what I mean? So I was going, whoa. You know, that, to add that to the mix.
You know, it would really be helpful to us if we could determine
exactly
the
where the
parameters
masters
of the shot.
All right. Well, let's get a camera here.
The way these guys work now is that there's got to be somebody who's reading the light meter also. And there were things like crawling into, you know, the inside of a spaceship that's hanging from a crane, right, to get a reading. And, you know, and Jordan, when he was okay, he could go do that. But there were times when it just really wasn't possible. I mean, Jordan's eye never wavered. I think what it was just his ability to get out there and, you know, get all the readings he needed on these enormous sets.
I might see over as far as that, as where the paper is.
That's for a close-up.
Right, I understand. But if that was out of the way, I would see the muslin, wouldn't I?
Yes, you would.
Okay. Well, that would be problematic. So we can't get the same effect without going a little bit harder, right?
David didn't just, you know, David didn't want like some overall light. He wanted, you know, variations and some hot spots and half a stop here, and that's what Jordan does. So, you know, I think that's, you know, it was just physically very demanding.
We ran Jordan's stuff that they'd shot so far, and I thought, Christ, I hope I'm good enough to match this, you know, because it was brilliant. The most challenging part of the shoot, I think probably the corridors, you know, because there's so much action in these corridors that led to that lead mine, you know, where all the lead falls down. You know, because tunnels are always difficult. You have to put a light at the end so it shines back, and then, you know, because there's nowhere to put the lamps. So I had to use little small units, quartz units, you know, that I'd hide behind the bulkheads and these sliding doors and things. But you could only shoot in one direction because you had to hide them. You couldn't have them shining back at you. So whenever we did the reverse, I had to take all the lamps and put them on the other side and so on. So that was a challenge, to make it get any shape and make the actors look good and so on. And to keep the requisite amount of mood in it, you know, because it's got to be fairly dark, otherwise people, you know, I mean, if you can see everything, there's no tension, there's no mystery, and there's no, you know, because you keep wanting to look in the shadows to see if the monster's there and so on.
Action! Yoo-hoo! Hey, fuck this! Come and get me! Take your train!
Going down those tunnels was terrific, I thought. I was surprised because we did it Steadicam, you know, and under crank to give it some speed and a sort of smoothness, really. And we shot it with a 10, because it was anamorphic film. We shot it with an unsqueezed 10mm lens, you know, which gave it that kind of strange distortion. And the Steadicam operator, Peter Robinson, came in. And he suddenly did this flip with the Steadicam equipment, and we said, "Wow, Christ, that's great! You know, can you do that while you're running?" And he said, "Yeah, sure, of course." And he started running, and then he twisted, you know, and he got this upside down idea. It was lovely. It was well, it wasn't lovely. It was quite scary, but at that time we were delighted, you know, because I'd never seen that done before. It was terrific.
Leave him.
We were shooting from the floor, so the ceiling became more important than the floor, which is the obverse of what generally happens, you know. I mean, normally you light from the top, or in the old days you used to light from the rail, you know, light from the top down. And now here suddenly you can't put any lights up there because they're all in shot, you know. But it's a style, and it really actually came off, you know. Of the four, I think Alien 3 is probably the most distinctive. I don't mean, I'm not pushing my own lighting, but the fact that it was all shot mostly from underneath made it distinctive, you know. It was different. And what amazed me, he conducted the whole unit from this monitor, you know. He used to sit in this monitor and look at the film, and they'd say, you know, via, well, just talking to the camera crew, you know. He'd say, move the camera left, push it in a bit, make a mark there. This is all through the monitor, you know, which amazed me. I'd never seen that before from a director.
And there were times where I had to do things that were very radical, like I shut down second unit a number of times.
I'd like A and B cameras on these, please. Can I see A and B? And action!
The whole sort of basis of finishing on that schedule was based on a very productive second unit. It was just like, so I just went and I stopped it, you know, and it was like, and then we kept trying different directors. Eventually we got a couple who we got some good work out of.
Is that it? Okay, let's put it in sync, guys. Total abandon now. I hope someone goes to see this movie.
The end of the film was very confusing for everybody because, from memory, again, it did seem that we were going to finish the film, you know, we were going to conclude everything, and then it got to the point where it seemed that that wasn't going to be the case. So then we ended up having to decide, you know, at what point do you say goodbye?
As we said, Saturday we'll probably be coming back, and then yesterday I heard they're going to finish it. That's the game. I want to see how they're going to do it.
It was unclear how we were going to end the shoot. And I think the deal was that we had to get back, we had to get out of London. You know, it was like a hemorrhage situation. You know, we were doing very small things with a huge, you know, it was like, I think the idea was that we had to stop. We didn't wrap the film. We stopped shooting.
I think we all recognized that we had holes in the movie that we needed to fill. Again, because we did not have a script going into the movie. And rather than staying in England and continuing to try and fill those holes, the studio made a decision to bring the production back to LA, take a period of time off where you can assess what is needed and go back and more surgically fix those holes. No one left England thinking that the movie was finished. We left England knowing that we had more work to do and that we were going to give David an opportunity to edit the movie, look at the movie, and determine what he needed.
They said to me, would you mind coming to the States to finish the cut now? And it would take 6 months. I said, fine, no. So we get there, and of course we haven't completed the shooting. So the first thing to do is to get the film all together and let the studio see it.
So sure enough, the movie goes way over. He comes in, he shows us a 3-hour version of the movie, which doesn't play very well. And now a vast, you know, reshoot, redo, and cutting process goes on.
When I got to Fox in Los Angeles, they ran the film for the American crew that were going to do this extra shooting. And I was in the theatre with them, because that was then the first time I'd seen an assembly myself. And when the lights went up, there was, you know, quite a bit of silence. Nobody actually said anything.
I saw the rough cut of the film, uncut. And there were some scenes in there that were pretty gross. There was an autopsy scene on the girl that I like certain gore in films. I do it, and it made me sick. It really grossed me out, and I remember that people got up and left, walked out of the theater at the time, and I was just thinking, this will never be in the film. They can't show this stuff. It was just too much, I thought. And when the film came out, it wasn't in the film.
The dog burst was that was quite gory. I remember when the first cut on that.
That's back
when
from
he
our
was
animals
sitting there
house.
shaking. That was like the Rottweiler or whatever. I can't remember.
Yeah, Rottweiler.
Rottweiler was shaking and doing all that thing. We actually had that thing come out and flop on the floor. And man, we went nuts on that sound. And it was all, everybody went, whoa, this might be too much for people, so they cut it way back.
We went into it knowing that we were looking at a work in progress. It was almost like a live reading of a book where you get the audience's reaction to know. So we went through that and we got the answers we needed.
So David and I said, well, what we needed, say, A, B, C, D, E, and F, these particular things, and then we'd have a meeting. They'd have these endless meetings to discuss what we should do. And then they would say, fine, we've now decided you can do A, E, and F, or something, missing all the rest out. We said, well, it really won't work, but no, we'll do that. So we do that, put them in, show again, and they realised what was missing was needed. That's the reason this thing got held up all the time, because the decisions were slow in being made, and then when it came down to the editing process, we had all these arguments.
They ended up shooting 6 more weeks, so or 5. You know, they shot a lot more, so it wasn't like they didn't give him a chance to ever do anything else. You know,
it did take a long time to set up. They did take some months to set up this, the additional shooting. And I do know that it was problematical because, Ripley had a shaved head, and that was hard. She didn't want to shave her head again.
She didn't like having to have her hair cut off like that because it took so long to grow back. And she had an agreement with the producers that if she had to have her hair cut off again like that, she would get a $40,000 bonus. And the producers, we're sure of it. We know what we're going to shoot. All of this. Well, they ended up changing things, and sometime later, Sigourney had to come back, and we did this shot. And instead of putting that much money into a bonus for her, I think for about $16,000, they had a beautifully handmade scalp piece that had all these very short little hairs in it. So it looked like she had been shaved, but her hair had been growing out a little bit during this time.
Shaving somebody's head and putting a bald cap on is one thing, and it's very hard to do on a woman to begin with. But to have stubble embedded into the bald cap, I don't think it had ever been done. I flew to New York, took a head cast of Sigourney. We made a foam bald cap, and then a friend of mine, Stuart Ardingstall, punched every hair into the head. He worked about a week on it, 8 days, I think, the first time. 12 hours a day, just punching hair into this head. Then trying to get the bald cap on was in itself the most difficult makeup I've ever done in my life, because with the hair punched in, it had a preordained hairline in it. So if you moved it a 1/16 of an inch in any direction, it completely threw off the hairline. Trying to get that down and then trying to get it, because foam would stretch, and trying to get it around the ears right and everything, it just was a nightmare. And to everyone's amazement, it worked. She shot the scenes. I remember when I saw the film, I couldn't tell.
Ripley! It's burning hot! Hit the sprinklers! Gas the fucker!
I told him at the time, I'll never do this again. I'm glad you got the shot, I'm glad it worked. I'll never do it again. So another month goes by. I get a phone call. Oh, we're shooting a whole new ending to the film.
We had a big fight about the ending, too, of Alien 3. This thing where Sigourney goes into the fire, struggling with the beast, the chest burster, was a real last-minute thing.
The ideas about how the movie was actually going to end had been up in the air and moving back and forth, and we kept getting different boards and hearing different stories about whether the chest burster was going to come out while she was up on top and she would grab it and take it and go over the edge, or whether she was even going to go over the edge or not.
I thought that if we went out, we sent her off with a kind of real signature alien signature, pregnant with this thing, struggling with it as she takes it to its death, that would be fairly strong. And then there was a whole big quandary because we'd heard that the Terminator ended with the guy falling into the lead. Same sort of deal. We thought, oh, God, oh, no. So that's when we thought, well, if she goes out struggling with it, that's so alien that no one's ever going to accuse us of... because the Terminator 2 hadn't come out yet, but we'd heard that it had this thing in it.
The penis that popped out of her stomach, you know,
Right,
it's like,
'cause
what,
yeah.
it was, you know, we got some laughs out of it, but, you know, again, we're not the writers, we're asked to do something, and
That one thing that bothered me, I still don't like the optical effect of her falling in
the fire.
The fire to me just didn't work when she does her backflip. You know,
my feeling for that was it was a rush to finish, and
Yeah.
I felt they were shortchanging themselves. I don't think the final visual of that was
ready.
anywhere near what it could have been.
They wanted to shorten the movie. I take a half hour out of the movie. I think it had to do with how many times they show it in theaters, so how much popcorn they sell and all that kind of stuff. And I think they were afraid of Fincher's yearning to have the movie be on other levels other than just the fear level and the action level. What David was after was something that was very very significant in the sense that when there's no meaning and there's no spiritualism, then you know that the odds are stacked against you. How do you cope in that environment? And the studio was afraid of it.
We were, just over a year in editing, weren't we? I mean, it was long time. That was from after we'd got the film cut, assembled. We were a year. So it was a long time, that picture. And the thing is, and when it came out, it didn't have what it should have had in it, which was a shame, because all that effort was wasted because of bad decisions.
I know David did have to scale back his vision for budget reasons, and I know that there was more on the surface of the planet planned.
Okay, let's get Stunt Ripley in here. Okay, watch behind you guys. Bringing in Mr. Lincoln.
The EEV was something that had already been designed, and in fact, they had built a full-size one in England that they were going to be, for one part of it, dragging up the beach. And there was an establishing shot where these oxen were pulling it up the beach from the water. I believe that never made it into the film.
I think it made a major difference to me because the thing is, the beach scene set up these inmates and set up the environment, and the fact that the doctor was a loner, he was there on all those things were very important, and the fact that you saw the way they worked, and it was very sort of barren, and it was like it was just these odd moments they could get outside, and that they used like Stone Age type gear. All those scenes at the front were invaluable to the film. To see her brought into the place, you saw what it was like, you saw all these bugs and all this other stuff it just set the whole place up and what it was, and we never had that.
You know, I think that there are several sequences that were filmed, as they are on any movie, that don't make it into the final product of the film. I think one major sequence was a sequence where they actually captured the alien in a room, and it was for one of the prisoners to go down and let the alien out and free the alien. And it was shot, and it worked great.
Catching it and letting it go. I mean, I can't tell you to this day why that edict came down, that we got to lose it, because we fought for it endlessly.
In the context of the whole of the movie, when you take this mythic creature and you're able to contain it, it loses some of its threat.
Having caught that alien when they did catch it made all the next half of the film more powerful, because you knew it was going to come out, but you didn't know when. It was the same, it's the whole logic with the alien thing. You never know when things are going to happen. and then losing this Golic character, letting it out. It was mindless.
The Golic character in the movie was much more important because he associated himself with the alien as almost a fiery angel of death.
They wanted Golic, you know, first of all to wig out, strike somebody, then he breaks out of this hospital, runs amok, goes to find the monster, who by this point is trapped. You know, they've incarcerated this monster, and he's meant to release this monster, team up with the thing, and go and kill Ripley. Fantastic! I'll take the part. Most of that stuff has disappeared, I think. You know. I've had friends say, in fact, we saw you in one scene and then you kind of disappear. You know, nobody knows quite where you disappear to, which is a bit of a mistake.